Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Yasmin, and I'm a business development manager here at FE Fund Info, and I'll be your host for this week's Demo Day Wednesday. As per the title, we'll be predominantly focusing on FE Analytics today. We might touch on some of the other solutions, but the purpose of today is to introduce you to the FE Analytics system. Next week's demo, for your awareness, is an intro into FE Cash Calc. So if you are interested in seeing more on our cash flow system, you can use the same link and book into next week's sessions too. And you'll also find an extended schedule of our Wednesday demos to come on the Demo Day Wednesday page. So feel free to have a look at what's coming in the next couple of weeks. So to kick things off, here is a rough agenda of what we're basically going to be covering off today. Let me just get that on the screen for you. So we're firstly going to be covering off an introduction into sort of the navigation of FE Analytics. So I'll essentially show you how to make your way through analytics and get started with the tool, basically. Next, we'll be going through your sort of how to use comparisons. So obviously portfolio comparisons are a huge part of the advice process in general. So how we basically do our proposed solution against maybe a client's existing proposed solution essentially. Our next thing we're going to be doing is reporting. So once we actually have a portfolio in the system, how we essentially see how we generate our reports and how we go about doing that. What we'll then be covering off is we'll be going through our risk profiling, so our end-to-end journey from questionnaire to investment solution. Throughout this whole thing, I will also be going through sort of integration. So essentially how FE Analytics speaks to other systems either outside of the ecosystem, so maybe your back office system or your platform, or ones in our ecosystem like FE Cash Calc. So how we'll essentially pull data through from them systems or push the data back out as well. And then the final thing we'll be touching on is obviously we'll have to go through some questions, which you feel free to go through your questions throughout. There's a top question box in the top right hand side where you can pop in your questions. One of my colleagues will be around to answer questions throughout, but at the very end we'll also be able to go through that. If for any reason we can't go through all of the questions, what I will do is I will make sure that we are coming back to you with some good responses essentially by the end of today probably. So fabulous. Before we go into the demo itself and jump into FE Analytics, I just want to take a moment to take a step back and have a chat about FE Fund Info and essentially where we slot into the investment ecosystem. So FE Fund Info is ultimately a data house. What we do is we aggregate, we collect, and we validate and we clean data. As you can see from this lovely slide, is our clients are 1,000 plus fund managers, which include 100% of the top 10 and 60% of the top 100 asset managers by AUM. We also work with banks and brokers, platforms, life and pension, and over 4,200 financial advice and power planning firms, and over 300 third parties and partners. So going on to the next slide, where we essentially fit in the ecosystem. So as we are collecting and validating and cleaning the data ourselves, we can count on both sides of a relatively fragmented market to service our clients. Now, who am I referring to when I say both sides of the market? Well, we like to position ourselves as sort of a bridge between that asset management side of the world, the institutional side, with whom we are dealing directly with their data, and then the distribution network, so the advisory market, who can then receive this validated and clean form of data via means such as FE Analytics, which is obviously what we're going to be discussing today, and things like TrustNet and maybe data feeds and things like that. So now we will go on to the actual demo itself. So I'm just going to exit out of this and go into my FE Analytics account. Fabulous. So what we can see here is obviously FE Analytics, our lovely research tool. So here is the interface, which in the background is powered by an absolutely enormous database of 300 plus funds, model portfolios, sectors, indices, you can see that here. How I like to look at analytics is essentially it's split into two sections. So here we have our input system on the left hand side, and then on the right hand side we have our output section. So the way you'd work through analytics is ideally and essentially going from left to right. So on the left is where we tell the system what data we are looking to see. So are we looking for a fund? Are we looking for a sector? An indice? Are we looking for a portfolio? And then essentially on the right hand side is where we tell the system what we're actually looking to do with this data. So do we want to create a chart? Do we want to create a table? Do we want to create a report, and what we want to do with that? So as this is a very basic general overview of the tool, we're simply going to start with sort of how we'd actually look for a fund in the first place. So there are two ways you could even look for a fund. We have this drop down section here where you can decide to filter via universe, which is the drop down here, management group, or sectors. So just to show you how that looks like, I'll just select BlackRock here, and then it will give me a drop down menu of funds within the BlackRock space. Just wait for that one to load. And essentially I could just go in and add that fund to my active list if I wanted. We also have this advanced instrument search here at the top, which I would recommend if you have any sort of identifier code. So it could be an ISIN, it could be a city code, it could be a CEDOL, or even if you have sort of some element of a name of a code, you can also do that. So I'm just going to grab a code now and show you what that looks like once we just copy and paste a code. Let's say I have an Excel spreadsheet full of the codes that I'd want, where just have that in some way, shape, or form. I can just paste that into this advanced instrument search, select that magnifying glass button, and wait for that to load with my fund match. And now this should load in just 1 second. Perfect. So I will add that to my active list as an instrument. Once I have added this to the list, I do have an input, so I can start playing around with the outputs as well. But before we do this, I'll just go through quickly some sort of basic fund information that I can really quickly access from just simply adding this fund to my active list. So the first thing I can do here is select this icon, and it will generate the fund fact sheet for me, which will have all the elements that you would expect to have on a fund fact sheet. We also have this little 3 dots here where we can have a quick access to more information just about the fund. What we can also do here is create alerts. So let's say this fund is part of your CIP and you're keen to be alerted about any particular movements to do with the funds. You can set that up here. So select what you would actually like to be alerted about, your parameters, and all of these alerts will be, you'll see at the bottom here. If I set up this alert, it would go to my email address. So whatever email is you're using that's attached to the account will essentially get that alert in. Now back to the input versus output situation. So as I said, because we have an input, we can now have an output. So I'll very quickly start with just showing you how we'll really simply create a performance line chart based on this fund here. So this will essentially create a chart based on things that I have active in my active list. And as I have this checkbox selected, obviously it's also the only thing in my active list at the minute, but let's say I had a list of 10 funds, it will basically perform this action on any fund or sector, indice, portfolio that I have checkboxed on this active list here. So yeah, let's just quickly do a 5-year performance line chart, very quickly generate that and show that fund's performance. Just wait for that one to load. So now we have this performance line chart. I have a couple of different options here. I can PDF it, I can save, as with most, every sort of report or chart, I can save this against clients. So let's say you're doing your research and creating research or reports throughout, you can definitely save that against clients, or you can convert that into a PDF and export that out into any reports that you're using. So that's just very quickly how we would sort of use this main input section here for funds. It's sort of similar when you're looking at sectors or indices, when you're sort of adding that to the active list. But I think realistically, the way most people will be using analytics will be to access portfolios. So whether that's MPS solutions, your own portfolio range, or a client's existing portfolio. So just jumping, all I did was jump across into this portfolio tab across the top. Here's where I'll be able to find all of the portfolios that I have in the system. So this is again, whether I built them myself, whether I am accessing any MPS portfolios, or again, as FE Analytics speaks to different systems outside of the ecosystem, you could also maybe import from your back office. So if I had a portfolio in IO, I could get that integration set up to pull in the data from there. And then equally, like sort of from platforms such as Transact, I could also pull in the data from there. So just to, obviously, I should probably select a portfolio and show you how that looks. So you have an option here just to scroll through the drop down, but appreciate you might have lots and lots of portfolios in your system. So just to make things a little bit easier for myself, you can also look it up. Let's say you've saved a client's portfolios against their name, or you're looking for a particular provider, or one in your fund range, and we can select that and simply just add that to the active list. Now you'll notice here on my drop down, I have access to the FEI MPS portfolio range. But if you are looking to have access to other different sort of MPS providers, all you'd need to do is jump into this left hand side here and essentially go into portfolio tools and go into the MPS directory. Now here you'll find most, if not all, of the major players. There's 90 plus providers in this list here, so I would recommend having a look at that. But yeah, let's say I wanted to look at Brewin Dolphin, for example. I wanted to be activated. What I would do is I would select this Activate Me button. Let's say I was just looking and I was researching different bits and pieces. I wasn't sure if I actually needed to have access to Brewin Dolphin's models. What I would do is I would ask to request more info. You'll see as well, there's also this little summary that each provider provides for us essentially. So you can go in and check that out as well. We'll also be launching a new MPS universe in the coming weeks, which will hopefully aid this decision process, and you'll be able to essentially access a high-level overview of the MPS data in from the directory before requesting the portfolio access essentially. So the first thing I will do again with the portfolio is similar to the fund fact sheet. Using this icon, I can generate a really quick report. It's a medium scan of the portfolio. And it's essentially like a little mini sort of portfolio fact sheet. It will have things when it loads, like portfolio comparisons, ESG ratios, asset allocations, sector split performance, and basically just like a general overview of the portfolio. So again, with this sort of report, we can go and save that against a client, we can PDF report it, we can change settings. So with all these reports, essentially if there are bits and pieces that you want to change, sort of if you want to change benchmarks, if you want to take elements out of the report, you can do so by using this sort of toggle panel here to do that. But this just gives a general overview, sort of a health check of the portfolio, let's say. And just to highlight before we kind of go into creating any outputs again on the portfolio, we essentially have two options here at the side that you will notice you don't have with a fund. Essentially what these two icons mean is if this one's checked, it means that I'm looking at the overall portfolio. And if this one is checked, it means that I am looking at the underlying holdings. So you can do it both. You can have both at the same time as well, but I'll just keep it with the overall portfolios for now. So like we did for the fund, I can go ahead and also just generate this performance line chart whilst we have it loaded very, very quickly. I'll go into sort of a 5-year performance line chart of this portfolio. Now, because this is an MPS provider, it's also a similar thing would happen if you have historic portfolios on your system, sort of you built in the history have a couple of rebalances. You'll notice here, I'll just maximize this. you'll notice here that we have these little blocks, and what they do essentially is represent each time a portfolio has gone through sort of a change or a rebalancing. Essentially, what I could do here is I can go up to chart options and generate things like what if scenarios. So just going into chart options, I could basically say, what if this portfolio had never gone through any sort of a rebalance? You can obviously check this at any point in time and then generate that chart. This would be particularly useful, I guess, if you're kind of doing your sort of due diligence for your MPS providers, or maybe you just simply want to show a client sort of the benefits of rebalancing or something like that. So yeah, again, you can save it, you can PDF it, you can do whatever you so wish with the chart then once you're happy. Perfect. So now that I've looked at a portfolio that's already been loaded into the system, let's say I have a client who is currently in a portfolio and I would be looking to put them into one of my portfolios. What I'd usually do is just select their portfolio and start obviously generating some outputs, doing some comparisons. But let's say for this instance that I don't actually have their portfolio on my back office, so I can't pull that through, and I haven't yet created it on the system as they're a brand new client. So we're going to quickly just go through portfolio building. Now, appreciate this is quite a broad demo, I guess, today. So there are lots of resources on our YouTube channel and things like that on very specific elements of FE Analytics if you're really looking to sort of dig in. But I'll just give you a rough overview of what we would sort of do if we're looking to build a new portfolio. So as intuitive as it is, we just click new portfolios. And essentially here, what I can do is I can add funds in a similar way to sort of the way we were looking for instruments in that initial tab. I could go through, I could filter by universe or management group. I can type in the codes and see sort of find my codes individually. But let's just say this client has given me or I've access to essentially this client's current portfolio in the form of a Excel spreadsheet or something like that. What I can actually do is I could use this bulk code importer at the top to essentially just bring in all of their funds at one point. You'll see here that there's a limit of 1,000 codes, but if you yeah, it will save you a lot of time if you do have that list of funds that you can just sort of pop straight into the portfolio rather than searching for them one-to-one, if you have that luxury, of course. So all of these codes can then be added to the portfolio. Now, just to highlight at the top here, so if you don't seem to have access to the bulk code importer, what you can do here is you can configure your toolbar and you can pop across anything that you're using pretty frequently. So I've configured that to include the bulk code importer and the export to FE CashCalc. So if you're a CashCalc user, you might have seen we had a new integration that went live, I think the week before last, that essentially you can now use your portfolio data and sort of create growth rates based on your portfolio to use within your cash flow. So that's a really handy button to have, I think, as you start using the tool more and more for that. So back onto the portfolio. Now that I obviously have my funds in and I'm happy with sort of the funds that I've put in there that's accurate for what the client is currently in, I will then need to say, the units or the weighting for each portfolio. As this person doesn't exist, so I'm just going to equalize that, but you'll obviously pop in the correct weightings for that. I could also, if I'd want, so right now I have my system set as the benchmark as the FTSE All Shares, but let's say I wanted a different sort of indice or a sector or something as the benchmark. So let's say I wanted to use an ARC indice. What I could do here is I would just essentially add this there at the benchmark. So if you're not happy essentially with what you have as your default, or it's changing for a specific reason, you can just change the benchmark there, which I think is a pretty handy thing to sort of be able to do. So right now I have this sort of static portfolio. This button here is how we're going to essentially convert the portfolio to historic. And let's say I had history of this portfolio. The client's given me each, like I have an Excel spreadsheet of each time their portfolio was previously balanced. This is where we would do that. So you'd pop in the date that this was the truth, essentially. If maybe I knew that this was rebalanced in April or something like that, I could also just pop in that detail to account for portfolio drift and things like that. I'm just going to leave that for today, but we can also pop in charges. So let's say you need to pop in your own charges, and or your obviously the fund fees will be taken into consideration, but any fees outside of that, you'll also need to make sure that you have that built into your portfolios, especially if you're sort of doing comparisons against MPS or things like that, that will also already have that taken into consideration. But basically, now that I'm happy with the portfolio that I have built, I'm just going to save this. I'm going to save this. I'm going to save this against a new client, just so any research I have going forward, I could actually save this against the client as well. And then I can save. So once this is saved, I will go into, obviously at the very beginning of the agenda, we went through sort of what we wanted to sort of do, which comparisons is a main element of this. So we'll start with adding the portfolio to the active list. And now I have basically my portfolio that my client is currently in versus the portfolio that I am looking to essentially put that in. So again, I can go into a performance line chart just to highlight here. I feel like I've just been doing the 5-year one, but let's say I wanted to sort of see a snapshot of different periods of time. Maybe I want to do 5-year, 3-year, 1 year. I could absolutely generate a chart that will encompass 3 different charts in there as well. Another thing I can do is I right now have this as a base as a percentage of change. And I think a really valuable thing for a client, I'm just going to reset this, a really valuable thing for a client as well is to actually see this in real terms. So let's say you know that Sam has invested at the very beginning of his sort of time, he put 200K into his portfolio. This way, when I generate the chart, it's actually going to show the client the their money in real terms, essentially, and something that they can really understand and kind of see, wow, if they had been in this portfolio, sort of the difference that could have made. Another sort of thing to make this even more powerful is, let's say we stick with these same chart options. I'm going to add just a few indices to sort of show different bits and pieces. So the first thing I want to do is actually make this sort of relative to inflation. So to essentially keep the buying power that they had at the beginning. So sort of have it in real terms. So I'm just going to look up CPI. I'm going to use that as my inflation metric, but obviously if there's something that you would prefer to use, you can absolutely do that. I'm then going to do a couple of what if scenarios. Now, where I think this has the most value is maybe convincing, well, not convincing, but proving people how beneficial investing is in the first place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show them essentially what would happen if they had cash. So a handy way of just finding interest rates of, I think it's 0 to 9.75 is to just type in FE interest into the indices bit here. So I'm just going to pop in a 0%. So pretending essentially that it's cash under bed situation. And yeah, essentially showing what their money will do. And again, I will compare that to CPI. And then I will also, I'm basically going to show them what would happen if they had the best interest rate in a savings sort of pot at any point in time. So I'm going to use MoneyFacts, 90 days notice and 100K. So then all I need to change here is I'm going to make this all relative, and I'm going to make it relative to CPI as my inflation metric. So we have a couple of different scenarios there. We have obviously if they'd been invested in the portfolio that I'm recommending. We have them being invested in the portfolio that they are currently in. We have this 0% interest, so that's kind of like cash under the bed sort of situation. And we have the very best interest rate that you could get kind of from a savings account at that point in time. And because everything is obviously relative to CPI, it's showing buying power, and just has a little bit more, I think, anyway. It just shows the client in real terms kind of what their situation is, and sort of in a way that yeah, it's easy to kind of comprehend. Again, I can save this against the client, and or PDF it, that sort of thing. I can also, change things in sort of chart options if I so wished. But yeah, we'll X out of that for now. So just getting rid of these sort of extra bits and pieces that I've sort of popped on. Appreciate we've been sort of focused on performance line chart, but just to highlight, just because that's the first one, there's lots of the other sort of charts that we can actually use. So we can create scatter charts, is another really popular one. And regular and savings is quite popular as well. So let's say, again, I guess it's just showing people in real terms what is happening to their money in different sort of scenarios and bits and pieces like that. So let's just, again, go with that 200K initial investment. Hopefully that's enough zeros. I'm going to say they do a regular withdrawal amount of £200, and I can generate that chart here. And again, that's just showing the client sort of it in sort of real life scenario, sort of what could have and will be happening, sort of thing. So perfect. So to conclude, I guess the portfolio piece, and I know we briefly touched on bits of reporting, sort of with generating medium scans and things like that. I guess one of the most popular things with doing some portfolio comparisons is, to everyone's shock, the portfolio comparison report. Here I can simply compare two portfolios on the system. Again, these drop downs are exactly as they were in under my portfolio tab. So I'll again go with this portfolio, and I'll go with Sam's portfolio here, and I can really quickly create a side-by-side comparison report to help you make a case as to why they might be transitioning from point A to B. And then, of course, you can do sort of the same thing in terms of portfolio comparison. If there's bits and pieces that you don't want to be included, you can, of course, take that out. You can also add your own notes or commentary here, for, if you're sending it to the client or for just your own reference as well. This just gives you a really quick snapshot, sort of a comparison side by side from both portfolios. So it's a very popular, very powerful report as well. So now I'm just going to axe this report, this portfolio really quickly. So we did go through the medium scan. Just to note, on these three dots here, you can also create a shorter version of the scan or a longer version of the scan and access some other sort of portfolio documents in there. But another sort of popular report on the system, and my personal favorite, is the custom portfolio report builder. Now, this pretty much does what it says on the tin. It's essentially a completely customizable portfolio report. If this is your first time using the tool, you'll notice here I have quite a few sort of different templates that I've created. But if this is your first time, you won't have any sort of templates. What I've kind of seen people do is, once you create a template, you could maybe label them in different ways. So if you know a client, if you have a specific type of client that won't want as much detail, or if you have a client who you'll know will want a complete breakdown of absolutely everything, you could label that, a bronze report versus a gold report, or maybe it's different points of the year that you're giving your clients different styles of reports. You can absolutely do that. And once you have these templates just built in the one time, you can then just keep selecting the template. Let's say I'll build one in now just to show you what it is. So I will, if you want any sort of, if you want to know kind of what each page looks like, you just click on it. Essentially, you'll get a preview. But essentially, you're just going to work from left to right. I'm going to add a performance report. I might want to do maybe let's say ESG, risk and return, or no, ratio analysis, what I've gone with. I'm going to do a portfolio breakdown, a diversification benefit report, And what I will then do is I will call that my silver report. I'm not going to save it against any clients because this is a report that I want to replicate across different portfolios moving forward. So I will just save that there. I'm going to override it. I've already created one of these before. I'll overwrite it, and now I have the silver report. I can action it on this active list, or I can, again, the drop down will have all the portfolios that you've created, any MPS portfolios, any that you've imported in, you can action it on there. I'm just going to do it on this portfolio here, as that's what I'm kind of keen to do. Populate these here. You can save it against the client. So I want to save it against Neve. I'll put my advisor name here. You might want to pop in just some more detail once you're filling it out yourself. I'm happy with using the portfolio's own benchmark, but again, if there's something else that you'd prefer to use, you could absolutely jump into this indices tab and chuck in CPI, chuck in a FTSE, chuck in whichever benchmark that you'd prefer to use. Again, I'm just going to kind of keep things as it is. I've also got these check boxes checked. So I want a cover page, I want a glossary, I want a page marker. You can put in a comment, you can put commentary in throughout. So if there are bits and pieces that you'd like to highlight or sort of say to the client outside of what the report will generate. But I will just generate this report now and show you what that looks like. Now, this will obviously all be branded as FE Fund Info, but this will be completely in your logo and things like that as well once that's generated. I have obviously added things like cover page and glossary. So if that's not something you're keen to do, or maybe this report is going to be slotting into sort of another report that you're creating, you could absolutely just have it sort of as like just take those things out basically and slot that in. But we'll just wait for that one to load. And as I said, maybe you do have once you do create just the template the one time, you can just keep using that template for each portfolio you deem appropriate. Or if you do have clients that you might want to, you know that Tom comes in, for example, and wants the breakdown of absolutely everything, but it's a bit of an outlier, you can save a template report against a client or save that in his name to make sure that you're giving him the report that he wants every time, kind of thing. So again, portfolio review, as that's what I've asked it to be titled. And this will just give me all the bits and pieces that I asked for in the portfolio template. So I wanted that little portfolio summary. I wanted the ESG analysis, the ratio analysis, a portfolio breakdown, the diversification benefit report, and then here is that glossary that I checkboxed here. I think this is just a really good addition, especially if you're assuming that your client might not have as much sort of financial knowledge and things like that. It definitely is just kind of a nice way to conclude the report, to give a bit more context around maybe bits and pieces that you already have in the report. So again, yeah, I could then take that out. If I maybe didn't want that cover page, you'd uncheck that and I could slot that into the report, or I can simply send that to my client, maybe slotting that into an annual review or something like that. So as promised, the final thing that I will touch on in the demo, I think it was our risk profiling system, the kind of end-to-end process that we have created in FE Analytics. Now, you'll essentially find this in Portfolio Tools again. It's under Investment Planner. A very silly thing to flag here is to make sure that you don't have your pop-ups blocked, because otherwise it won't sort of work essentially. But the first thing that we need to do, these are essentially clients that I have saved in FE Analytics. So if I go into client tools here, I can view all of my clients, and these are the clients that I have built through FE Analytics, not through Investment Planner, just a flag as well. But you can do it that way as well. So yeah, let's just go into this first client here that we have. So the first thing that we do need to do is we need to create a plan. And once we've got that plan created, we can start sort of maybe putting their current portfolios onto it, or we can, yeah, I'll show that to you in a second. So let's just say, tax wrapper, give them a personal pension, and I'm going to say that we know what portfolio that they're currently in for this plan that they have. Just scroll down to portfolios that I've created and save that. Obviously, you'll probably have one that's in the client's name and you might have to search for it and things like that. But again, exact same drop down as you'll find in every other sort of bits and pieces. So now that we've created a plan, the next thing we need to do is do an attitude to risk. There's a couple of different options that we have here. So I could potentially email this to the client, or I can print the questionnaire and have them do it paper style, which hopefully we might be moving away from. Or we can start the questionnaire as well, which I will do now as the client is obviously not real, but I could do it with the client. Another important thing to flag here is if you do have CashCalc and you either prefer using the attitude to risk in CashCalc, or you already have that information in there, so you may as well. You can absolutely, there is that integration there where you can link the attitude to risk back and forth from either one that you've created in CashCalc, or I'll show you later on how we'd actually push the attitude to risk from here into CashCalc. So there's no need to duplicate information. It's the exact same questionnaire. Yeah, it's just depending on what system you have decided to fill it out in. So I'll just go bang down in the middle for this. Now, just to note, this will take into consideration sort of a client's actual attitude to risk, and it will also take into consideration, you'll see at the end here, their investment term, because obviously there is going to be quite a difference between somebody investing for 4 years and being quite adventurous versus somebody who has maybe 50 years to invest. So it will just take that into consideration. Now that I have this sort of the questionnaire results. I can create documents such as possibility of losses. Let's just let that load. And I could send this to the client just so that they have their sort of capacity to loss. I can slot this into a report. We can also generate this later on in our reporting suite, but I might want to essentially go and make sure that this sort of risk level and this term level is resonating with the client maybe before proceeding with the rest. Now I have the capacity for loss questions. So this is essentially where the client will have an opportunity to voice any bits and pieces, and will potentially change, obviously, the initial kind of three medium term that I got before. They say no to these, but let's say a client did have investment experience and things like that, they could absolutely fill that out there. And now I get this summary. Now for this demo, I will just click yes, I agree with it. But let's say during them final sort of bits of the questions that came out after we sort of got that initial result of 3, we wanted to change it. Here we could absolutely manually adjust the risk result, maybe based on a conversation that we've had off the back of questions, or just discussions that we've had after we've given the client the capacity of loss, or just something like that. But for this, I will just be agreeing with this. And here is where I can export the attitude to risk to CashCalc. But what I am going to do right now is I'm going to go into suitable portfolios on the system, essentially based on the client's risk result of that 3 medium that I decided was accurate. So I'll just wait. Basically what the system is doing right now, it's loading all the portfolios that I have that sit within the FE risk score range that I have set out to be a 3 medium, basically, on the system. So you'll see that the indicative FE risk score is 65 to 75. These portfolios, however, have been mapped by somebody in my team, essentially somebody in my team who have deemed these portfolios a 3 medium, essentially. So what we can do now off the back of that is we could either do some portfolio comparisons, so maybe by just selecting both portfolios or different types of different portfolios maybe to compare. Or let's say I know that I definitely want to switch this person to this FEI responsible portfolio here. I can, create a switching report at this time or view portfolio details. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to confirm selection, and it's going to bring me up to the reporting center. So I'm going to complete the plan. and then it will bring me up into the reporting center. So report center. And here I can basically customize the report that I want to do. So I'm going to add a cover page, an attitude to risk, a possibility of losses, comparison. As we are actually making a change, I think comparison and switching reports are very powerful in this sort of report. And I'm going to generate the report. Now, as this might take a quick second and appreciate we don't have a lot of time, I created this report earlier on with the exact same sort of toggles as is there. So again, this will be branded with your brand essentially. It will have just portfolio report, the client's name. I obviously wanted the attitude to risk to be in there so the client can reflect on that. The report, additional questions, and then we have the asset allocation report, we have the comparison report. We should be going into the switching report shortly, but essentially it's just a complete sort of breakdown of the elements that I chose to sort of include in the report, and then concluding with the switching report. So that is all from me. I'm just going to jump into the chat quickly and see if there have been sort of questions. So there doesn't seem to be any questions in the box right now, but obviously if you if you have any questions kind of that come up off the back of this, or you want to just chat about some specific areas, please do feel free to sort of get in touch. Also feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, or again, I know I mentioned at the beginning, next week will be FE Cash Calc, so please do feel free to sign up for our Demo Day Wednesday series. And yeah, thank you so much for joining today.